Welcome everyone to Fergo and the Freak. This is episode 310 and I have a very special guest. It's Jessica Dunne. How are you, Jessica?
Good, how are you?
I'm very, very, very good. Um, you know why. I don't need to tell you. We're just flying at the top of the ladder. But today, we're not talking about winning. We're talking about the Newcastle Knights. And you've got some thoughts on the Newcastle Knights this season, I believe.
Oh, I know you've been waiting for this. I know you've been waiting for me to be back, so I'll have this moment.
Yeah, I've basically been prodding you on Twitter like, oh, this is a bad loss. Oh, this is a bad one. You need to talk about this.
Yeah,
And so now we've got to this point, and it's been a weird season for the Knights because I felt like they were going to be not really, really good this year, but I felt like they could be like maybe sixth or seventh on the ladder.
at least
And
competitive.
yeah, they felt like they were building to something. And not anything huge, but it just felt like they were going to make a step. And it's weird. Their off season started with all the drama about Mitchell Pearce. We won't go too much into that, but because everyone knows what happened there. And he had the captaincy taken off him. And then we start the season and he gets injured very early in the season. And on top of all of that, their performances just feel like there's something missing or something going on. What do you feel like is happening with their season?
It just feels lazy. Like
Yeah.
everything they do is lazy.
Mm.
And it's so infuriating to support a team that was built on, hard graft and the generation of players who gave it all, and it just doesn't feel like anyone on the field for the Knights at the moment do that.
Yeah,
They just
and
roll over.
yeah, they really do. And like, I mean, if I was to say to you, who in this team really feels like they've been putting in, week out, you start to think of like two or three players, maybe.
I would put like Mitch Barnett up there.
Hmm.
I feel like uh he's probably sometimes the only one holding a game together.
Hmm.
Maybe Connor Watson, just because I think he's played every position on the park so far this season.
Mm.
I feel like he's just, if it wasn't for him, we'd be in a lot more trouble.
Yeah.
But other than that, then it does really start getting difficult. You might have a player who has like one good game or a good half, but other than that, it's been a bit diabolical is a word I like to use.
Yeah, and like you brought up an interesting thing about Connor Watson, and he feels like, I mean, without him, I think the Knights are in a lot more trouble because he's been all over the park. I don't know how he could. I mean, he must turn up to training on a Monday and be like, "Where am I playing this weekend?" Oh,
Yeah.
fullback. All right, I'll try
Ooh.
fullback. Um, and it's weird that I just think it's a little bit weird that a first grade team is having to rely on somebody to be that versatile. You'd feel like that they should really have players that they can bring in. I know they tried Tex Hoy. Do you rate Tex Hoy? I don't really rate him.
I've been really disappointed in Tex Hoy this season. He was a player I was really excited for.
Hmm.
We had a glimpse of him last season, and he looked good for such a young age in his first season. But it's just not worked with him. Maybe he just needs a few more years.
Hmm.
So I think he's only like 18 or 19.
Mm.
Maybe he just needs a few more years. And the same with Phoenix Crossland, another one who just hasn't had it for me this season.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Connor Watson comes in, and that he's sort of picking up the slack for uh, that lack of experience. And I don't want to say lack of ability, but that's what it does feel like sometimes.
Yeah, and like I think when you look at this team, I think Tyson Frizzell's been not too bad. Like I don't think you could look at him and say that he's been a really disappointing buy. He's been playing, I think, a little bit better than he did last year for the Dragons. But if you look at the overall forward pack, I think the forward pack has been an abomination this year. Like lazy,
Yeah.
uh, soft. David Clemmer, I don't know what's happened to his football, but he went from being a test player to he just doesn't even stand out in this pack.
No, that's probably been the biggest shock for me is Clemmer. Clemmer was always someone you could rely on to stand up and, get angry and steamroll. But it's just, like you said, it's just not happened this season. He's not, it feels like there's been like not as many offloads or he just sort of gets the ball and runs at his closest defender and takes a tackle. That's it. He's never, because he was like leader in post-contact meters and everything last season, and doesn't feel like we've had that at all.
No, not at all. Callan Ponga has been injured a lot, and they're a different team when he's on the field. When he's not there, they look like no hopers. I love Callan Ponga. Right? Like, do you think he's a superstar? Because I think he's a superstar.
I think he's a superstar. I think, he's just been ruled out for the game against Sea Eagles, and it's like, oh god, do I even want to watch this game? Because
did they rule him out?
He's just been ruled out this morning.
I haven't read that. See, I'm looking at the NRL website and they've got him in the team. Oh, no, man.
He's with his I think continuing groin injury.
Wow.
Which also puts him in doubt for first Origin, but which as a New South Wales fan, I'm totally fine with.
Good. If you had said you're a Queensland fan after what we talked about before the podcast, I was going to be really disappointed. I'm not going to say what we were talking about before the podcast, but geez, because I can't, because now you've got dirt on me. But anyway.
And you look at the rest of the Knights team and think, where the hell does our creativity come from? Where the hell are points coming from? Because it's very hard to find. And you imagine, I think, last season, towards the end of the season, he choked a little bit at the end of last season, but I think that was because there was a lot of pressure on him to perform, and it was the realization that he really was where the points were going to be found. But this season, his injuries this season have just been awful, and our position on the ladder sort of reflects that.
Yeah, and like I'm really concerned about how often he's getting injured. And I feel like it is to do with him playing at fullback. I weirdly think he would get less injured playing at 5'8", because, and I've said this on the podcast before, if you look at most of the fullbacks in the NRL, they're pretty big human beings. And Callan is a slighter player. He's more along the lines of a little bit bigger than a Jonathan Thurston. And I just feel as though when he plays fullback, he gets beaten up just by taking, high kicks and stuff like that. And I feel as though, weirdly, he would be a lot better if he was playing in the defensive line and, not taking those hits where he's jumping in the air and running the ball back and things like that, because he's 100%, he's got the ability to play 5'8". There's no doubt about that. And I wonder if that is something that Adam O'Brien will be thinking about going forward, because, this is a young man that the Knights they will build their club around. And if they become a great team in the next 5 to 10 years, you see Callan Ponga being their star player. But, as it is right now, it feels like he's getting bashed out of the game.
It feels like it's a weakness that other teams have spotted, because you look at some of the hits he gets, and anytime anyone goes near him, you can sort of hear the crowd go, please don't hurt him.
Yeah.
But I also, if the Knights rush him back from injury because they're so aware of his importance, that maybe he could do with like another week or two off, just to really make sure he's at 100%, but he's been brought back because we really have no one else.
Would you be against them saying, look, your injury is going to keep you out for 3 weeks. We're going to keep you out for, and this is considering the way the Knights season's going overall. If they said to him, we're going to keep you out for 6 weeks and we want you to start putting on weight, we're going to get you healthy, and then we're going to put you through a weight regime where you're going to start to build yourself up, so that by next year's season start, you're maybe 8 kilos bigger. We're going to put you into 5'8", and maybe it being detrimental to this season, but looking ahead, because he signed that new contract, they're saying we're going to have you as 5'8" next year. Would you be against that?
I don't think so. I think this season is gone. And anything that could improve hopes for next year, I'd be totally for. It would be something like as a fan, I'd seriously consider being happy with, because they need to do something. He's too slight. I think is Lomax at the Dragons. He was one of those like really slight players who put on weight, and his game has improved.
Yes.
Immensely. He's a real powerhouse now, in my opinion. To see something like that happen with Ponga would, I think, for the future of for his playing future and for the Knights to really become this super club or whatever they want in the next 5 years, they need to look at the long game.
Yeah, because like even if you took away, say he lost 10% of his athleticism, and his athleticism is top shelf, but if he lost, say, 10% of that athleticism, he's got the football sense, I feel like, to be such a good playmaker that I think it'd work. I think it'd work for him. And he's a tall guy. Like, it's not like he's a short guy, but he's just built differently. And I feel as if they chucked a bit more weight on him. And look, I think the team they're playing this weekend, the Seagulls, Tom Trbojevic is the same sort of build. He's very slight. And once again, he gets injured all the time. You know, and I feel like there's something in that.
Maybe it always looks worse when they get tackled as well, just because they're all limbs. They just look like they crumple more.
Yeah, there's that possibility, hey.
It's just because it just looks like the impact is a lot worse because there's a lot more to curl in. But yeah, can you get up to the Hunter and coach, please?
They just need to get both of them together and just take them out for lunch. They just keep buying them food, and they're like, "What are we here for?" And it's like, "Never mind that. Just keep eating.
Just keep eating, please."
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's something to think about. Now, another player that's been injured a lot this season, and it feels like his season hasn't started off at all, has been Bradman Best, who at times looks like he could be like there are some times in the game, if you said to people they should name him for New South Wales, you'd be like, yes, definitely. And then other times you're like, oh, he's playing, is he? I didn't even realise he's out there. And then other times it's like, how is he limping again? Like, what's going on? He's huge. Why is he getting hurt? What are your thoughts on Bradman Best?
I think he's another one. He's only like 18, 19.
Mm-hmm.
And I will reserve making a final decision on him, I think, for another year or two.
Mm-hmm.
Because he very much burst onto the scene. But it also feels like the Knights get to a point where they just throw him the ball and say do something as well.
Yeah.
And like set him up for failure.
Yes.
And all their hopes rest on his very broad shoulders. But
there's never a point where you say, oh, wow, Bradman Best was on the end of a really good pass or a really good play there. It's like, oh, Bradman Best had to throw 3 players to the ground to do anything.
Yeah.
It is. I feel sorry for him in that sense, but he feels it's weird. There's always these Newcastle players that they've had over their history where they've been like possible rep players and they have just always been injured.
Yeah, and I sort of wonder if that is because of just such a heavy reliance on them, because we may only have 1 or 2, dare I say, superstars or players who could be superstars, and the team just relies on them, and they get brought back from injury too early, or they just get overworked because they're the only ones doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I will reserve judgment on Bradman Best until he plays like at least 2 games in a row. And
yeah.
you see him and you expect him to be there the next week. It's like, oh no, he's injured again. Never mind.
Yeah, it just can't get going this season. Now, Uh, I know you've been ready to have a chat about this bloke. Blake Green.
Uh,
Blake Green
uh,
retired this week, and have you got some thoughts on Blake Green?
I I don't want to be too harsh
Just
because
do
no, because my harshness comes from just anger at the club and the team in general, not specifically at Blake Green, although he did not help the situation in the past couple of weeks.
it. Hmm.
But he came to the club last season when we were in dire straits, and he only played like was it 2.5 games or something before he got injured. And considering we didn't have a spine left, he really was a godsend, and he played well. And I think there was a lot of hope that he would resurrect our season, and I think Knights fans were very receptive to him as well,
Hmm.
which is the other thing. If you can turn up and show that you're here to play, Knights fans will welcome you very quickly. And then he got injured, and he just has not been the same player this season. And when, obviously Pierce is out and Kalen's been out, and we've been playing 12-year-olds in key positions, there was a lot of pressure on Blake Green, and he just didn't deliver.
Yeah.
And if you talk to any Knights fans, and like, we can tell you how a set's going to happen.
Hmm.
We'll take the 5 tackles, our forward pack won't do anything. And if we do manage to hold onto the ball, because we do like to drop it, Blake Green will then kick it to the opposing fullback on the 10-metre line.
Hmm.
And that's it. Like, that's just how it goes. There is just nothing else going on.
Yeah, and that was the thing. They kind of got him to be an experienced head, have a decent kicking game, and guide the team around the field. And that's what I felt this season, was that his kicking game was not very good at all,
No.
and
And
he wasn't guiding them around the field.
we had Mitchell Pearce, who that's his MO, is just put it up in the air.
Mm,
And it lands in the same spot every time.
yeah,
And so there was, I don't want to say relief when he got injured, but there was a little bit of belief that, okay, maybe things will change, because we lost Pierce but got Green back.
yeah,
And then nothing changed.
yeah.
Green just did the same thing we've had for the last couple of years, where there's just no creativity on that last play.
Mm.
And we don't cause other teams any problems.
No, and like that, I feel like that's why Ponga is so important to this team, because like you would have Pierce wouldn't be that creative, but then you could at least get it to Ponga, and he might do something out wide. And yes, it's always going to be on the left-hand side every single time. But at the very least, on that left-hand side, they were a little bit dangerous. Whereas when you don't have Ponga there, it's like, well, what are we doing? Okay, just kick it to the fullback, and there's nothing else going on. There's no questions being asked of the opposition. They know that, the Knights aren't going to spin it wide on the last. There's not going to be a little chip kick. There's nothing else is going to happen, except it's either going to be hoofed up in the air or just kicked down to the fullback for a long kick.
Yeah, and that's one of the most infuriating things about watching the Knights.
Mm.
Is it's boring.
Yeah, yeah,
It's boring, and you don't get the chance to get excited over something, because it's just, tackle, play the ball, go again, tackle, play the ball, go again. Oh, we've kicked it, that's it.
yeah.
And then you watch other teams play us, and they're all just targeting our right side because, well, yep. There's only so much anger one person can have. And yeah, like last week against the Cowboys, that right side was just diabolical.
Terrible. So terrible.
Yeah. No, I can't go there.
See, I'm trying to take you into the weeds. I'm trying to take you to that place.
How the hell? Dulong got a hat trick in 50 minutes because he just kept going at the right side. Like, y'all didn't learn.
Yeah.
You just didn't learn. You just drifted in 15 meters off the sideline. Oh, what do you think's gonna happen?
Oh man. So you talked about Pearson when you lost Pearson, and that there was and I understand what you mean. It felt like there was a chance for the Knights to, because while Pearce was there was a feeling like there's something hanging over the team. And here's a chance that we haven't got Pearce now, and we're not going to have him for a long time. Maybe we can do something different. And I actually talked about the fact that there might be a chance that by the time Pearce come back from his injury, that the club would have moved on the field, and
Yeah.
basically been able to say, look, Mitchell, we've found our next halves pairing, or we've got a combination that's working, and maybe you should look elsewhere at this point. That doesn't feel like it's happened at the moment. Do you think that with the loss of Green and the fact that no one else has really stepped up into that role, that Pearce is now weirdly a play that you've kind of got to build around a little bit, at least in the short term?
Yeah, it's a never-ending story, is it? Because I feel like we've been here before, but we finally think, okay, maybe as you said, this is the chance to move on without Pearce, because he's probably only got another season or two left in him, really. And I was like, oh well, no, now we're relying on him coming back to hopefully give us a spark for 10 minutes. Even though we know exactly what's going to happen, which is the same as what's been happening for the last 4 years. And I think the other player I've been concerned about this season has been Kurt Mann.
Yep.
Because for me last year, he was our player of the season.
Yes.
I thought he was brilliant. He really stood up when shit hit the fan with our spine. And he was fantastic. And he's been a shell of himself this season. And I don't understand why, because for the most part, he's been in his favoured 5/8 position. And again, nothing's really come of it. I don't understand. And I'm trying to it says a lot about the Knights that I'm genuinely going, who is our spine? And we've got Jaden Brayley as well.
Yeah. And he must be really he is the future of the club. He's been named captain and he looks really good, but he kind of goes missing a little bit and it's not his fault, but when he's playing behind a pack that has just got no punch at all, they're not getting over the advantage line at all. Anything he does, he has to kind of create himself completely. And if you put him in, if you put him in any top team, if you put him in any team, you could put him on the New Zealand Warriors, he would look like an absolute game breaker. Put him in the Parramatta team, he'd be ridiculous. Put him in the Panthers team, he'd be undefeated, but that's another story. So arrogant. He's been a bright light for the Knights, but he hasn't really been able to show more because the pack is so bad and there's no creativity. And if you just look after your defence around the ruck, what are the Knights going to do to you?
Exactly. It's just, we didn't go anywhere. And like you said, it's not his fault. He's the one who's passing off hoping something happens. And yeah, it's just a tough watch because there's just nothing happening all over the park.
Yeah, it sucks.
It's one of those things you can't break down a certain area because it's just all bad.
That's the thing. It's right across the park, and then as I said, you get to the bright lights in the team season, and it's well, when Callum Ponga plays, he looks really good, but he's hardly playing. Bradman Best looks big and strong until he's not playing, and Jaden Brayley's playing behind one of the softer packs in the competition this year, and outside of that, it's Connor Watson is on track to play every position that's ever been made in rugby league.
We're just going to make a few more up for him as well at this point.
I want to see him named as the 18th man so he can say, I literally played 1 to 18 in a 17-man game. That'd be great.
Don't joke about that because the Knights would manage to do that.
Poor Con. I really feel sorry for Connor Watson. I've seen him, there's games where I've turned it on and I'm like, he's playing fullback. What's going
Yeah.
on? Like, it's just so weird, and I'm sure that's not why he went to the Knights.
No, and it'll be interesting to see if he does play fullback this week, because now that Kalen's been ruled out,
Mm.
Tex Hoy's on the extended bench, so I imagine he'll come in.
Mm.
But who will get the nod? Will it be Connor off the bench or Tex? So
Yeah, and
maybe he may have the starting. He may have the number one jersey against the Eagles. The Eagles.
I don't know what I want more for him. Like, I feel like I want him to just stay on the bench. So at least he's coming on the field and he's playing more of a position that he would play rather than being a fish out of water at fullback. Like, he has to be there. He should win their Clubman of the Year this year,
He
100%.
he has to. Agreed.
Now, the coach. Uh, you get him in, lots of fanfare, and he's the coach of the future. Their first season, it all looks pretty good. They definitely improve on what Nathan Brown had been doing. This year, they feel aimless. Is that a worry for you?
Yeah. It's what was a worry for me was I think it was after the Titans match where we went up there and got battered again,
Mm-hmm.
and he just sounded so defeated in
Mm,
his post-match press conference. He was talking about a culture of losing at the club, and that there were problems, and he was like, as the coach, that's my job to sort it out. But he didn't sound convincing
yeah.
at any point. He just sounded really defeated, like he didn't even know where to start.
Mm,
And that's not great as a fan watching that, going, this is the guy who, we're relying on, we're paying to fix these problems. And he doesn't look like he has a clue. Like, where do we go from here?
You know, the thing that worried me about O'Brien, and it must have been 4 games into the season, and it was like the third game where they'd had footage of him throwing stuff in the dressing room and blowing up. And I understand it. Like, I totally get it, because when you watch this Knights team, that's all you want to do is, like, say,
Mm-hmm.
can somebody wake up? Does anybody want to be here? What is wrong with you? Like, has anyone got any personal pride? But there's only so many times you can do that as a coach. And it feels like he did that. They didn't respond whatsoever. And it's like, okay, what's plan C?
Yeah, I can't remember which game it was, because they've all been pretty bad.
Mm,
But it was after it was they had vision of him like losing at the team at halftime in his halftime talk. He was furious.
mhm.
And then the players came out and nothing had changed.
Yeah.
And like, it's exactly like you said. Well, what where do you go from there if the players still can't manage to G themselves up after that?
Mhm.
And like, you look at the team, and I understand they are like a young team. There's like, you're either like at the end of your career, at the beginning of your career with the Knights, if
Mhm.
you look at the team, but in like these key creative roles as well.
Yeah.
And but still looking at them, particularly like Crossland and Hoy, you look at them and think, okay, are we going to be able to rely on these guys in 5 years? Will they become a great player for this vision that we've got of, contesting the top four? And I don't know. I don't have that belief in them.
Yeah, and the problem is that if they don't end up if they don't end up finding something, because you watch them and, like, a lot of them, you're waiting for it to happen. And
Yeah.
if they don't find that extra thing, if it doesn't click for them, or for whatever reason they have an off season where they come in and it's like, oh, they got it,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you've got this team where the forwards are all aging out, because the forwards you would have thought would have been their strength, but the
Exactly.
forwards.
That
Sorry,
was
go on.
where, like, you hope. I was gonna say that was like where you hope. Like, you look at it on paper and you go, these guys are gonna steamroll everyone. There's like representatives all over the board. I think pretty much all of them have, like, at least played for their state. mean, ironically, I think like Mitch Barnett, has he had a call up to Origin? But he.
Has he had? I don't know if he has. I don't think he
Lockie
has.
Fitzgibbons played for Queensland, the Saifidi brothers at New South Wales, Clemmer, obviously, Frizzell. And then, like, you look at Mitch Barnett, and he's the only one doing anything.
Yeah. But if and when they all age out, and if you get to that point where all of these young players that you're kind of hoping, if they don't pan out, that kind of leaves the club at square one again, and they can't afford to do that.
And Knights have a habit of holding on to players, and because all I think of is Jared Mullen, who was like, I remember when he was coming through after Joey Johns, which admittedly are possibly the biggest boots to fill in the game. And he was 19 or something coming through, and he was slated as being, the next Joey Johns. It's going to be all right. We've got Mullen. You won't even notice the difference. And it just didn't work. And he was a dead weight for so long for the Knights. And I know it all went horribly wrong for him, but there was a bit of a relief when he was forced out, because there was it didn't ever feel like the Knights would let him go until they were forced to. And like fans were like, okay, thank God we can move on now, because they just hold on to players. And if, as brutal and as cutthroat as it sounds, if these players don't pan out, these young'uns that we've got coming through now, like we have to make that decision to move on and to change directions. We can't just keep hoping that it will work, because we did that 10 years ago and it didn't work.
And it almost feels like that is wrapped up with the Pearce situation, in that like Pearce is going to get you to a point. And I think he got the Knights to the furthest he could get them, which was not a terrible, terrible, terrible team. And he did that job, and he did the job that they wanted them to. But then you've got to say, okay, we're targeting, and it like almost anyone, like he's maybe not the ideal candidate, but a Mitchell Moses or somebody along those lines who you can say his upside is going to be higher, and he might take us somewhere new because we want to go somewhere new, but they can't let go of the security blankets at the Knights.
Yeah. Like we limped into the finals last year.
Yeah.
And then were brutally kicked out of them.
Yeah.
And it's, that was, like you said, off the back of Pearce doing his best. Whereas we need someone young enough that we can then build a team around, who isn't going to decline rapidly towards the end of their career.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing. You may bring someone in at the end of their peak, and then we only have them as they, taper off into retirement, which seems to also be our MO.
Yeah, that's true. Get somebody that's got like 1.5 okay seasons left in them, but you sign them for 3 years.
Yeah, which is unfortunately where we went with Blake Green. Although I would also argue that his injury probably played, because it was quite a serious injury he had.
Yeah, especially at his age too.
Yes.
Like I was very critical of him as a player for quite some time, but you can't overlook the fact that that's a hard injury for a 20-year-old to get over, let alone someone at his point of his career. And look, you've got to give him credit that he's gone to the club and said, I can't get there anymore. I can't get to that level anymore. And everyone's just like moved on it. I think that that's a good thing for everyone involved.
I think, and like, as you wonder how much he does see what the fans say and things, and particularly because Newcastle is such a bubble. Like if you live in Newcastle, you can't escape the Knights. It's as a fan, it was a bit of relief that he's put up his hand and said, I can't do it anymore, because the Knights would have held on and kept playing him, and it would have just been the same story.
Yeah, the old Jared Mullen scenario.
Oh.
Although I do hear that, people in Newcastle miss Jared Mullen's distribution. So anyway, now the Knights, the Knights CEO made a statement on the Knights website, and everything's fine.
Everything's great.
It's great. It's fantastic. What did you think about that?
It just, it made me laugh
Yeah.
because if like it just shows you how fickle football is and how fickle sport is, because one of the things they really pushed home was how financially stable the club was and how we're one of the most profitable teams in the game.
Mm.
And like still we were scoffing at that. But if you asked us, during after the Nathan Tinkler era, when we were about to be sunk and we didn't know if we were going to have a club the next season, if you had said, okay, don't worry, in 2021 you're going to be the most profitable teams, we would have like bit your arm off.
Yeah.
Because we would have been so excited. Yet the state of the team when we are on the ladder, we're like, no, we don't care. We don't care about the money.
And like when he said that, because you sent me the article and he didn't even say much about it. You were just like, oh, And I read it and I'm like, okay, I feel like I feel like the Knights don't jump out at me as a team that is making heaps of money. And I know their crowds are really good and they've got some pretty good sponsors and things like that. But it's not like you look at them like, say, a South Sydney where they've got all of these giant sponsors on their jersey and you kind of can see where they're making a lot of money. I kind of read it as like the overall group that owns the Knights is in a good financial position, not necessarily the Knights itself.
Yeah, we're owned by West.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. Also, our major sponsor is one of, I don't know if he's the CEO, but he's quite high up in the company, is the dad of Lockie Fitzgibbon.
Oh, okay.
Little fun fact for you. So I'm like, I wonder how the Knights got that sponsorship. and yeah, it's just one of the things he said as well was the Knights want to be the team that from the Central Coast to the Queensland border, that everyone in that area, it's quite a large area to support. And I know this sounds very weird coming from a Sydney-based Knights supporter, but like that's not what what Novocastrians want.
Yes.
We don't care about people who support the Knights who live 7 hours away.
Yes, I thought that as well.
It's like, it's Newcastle. Because it wasn't there. I don't know if I hallucinated this or what, but there was a time where they did want to remove Newcastle from Newcastle Knights.
Ooh, I can't remember that. Oh, man, that wouldn't have been for very long.
It was. And like I said, I don't know if that was just a really bad dream, because these people haunt my dreams.
Well, you look at the Hunter Mariners, like the Hunter Mariners turn up during Super League in Newcastle, and Newcastle's like, fucking Hunter? What? That's not us.
Yeah, we can't include like Cessnock.
Yeah. Like if the Knights CEO come out and said we want to make Gosford our own, Knights fans would be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
And particularly when you look at other sports, and I'll go to the A-League, where like one of the big derbies in the game is the F3 derby between the Central Coast Mariners and the Newcastle Jets.
Yeah.
And then just turn around in another sport and go, actually, we're going to like join with the Central Coast and be one happy family. What would the F3 derby be like? Like, I was sitting next to you in the same colours last week. It's not going to happen.
And the idea that like everything to the border, and all I could think of was like all of these players that are in northern New South Wales who go and play in the Queensland Cup and go and play for like the Titans and things like that. And I'm like, I get it. I understand like what he's aiming for, but I don't know that it's the right thing to at the very least say out loud.
Yeah, and particularly because I may also be slightly one-eyed when I say this, but like the beautiful thing about the Knights is like it's a one team town, and everyone in Newcastle goes for the Knights, and it's such, and I think it was like Blocker was once said, you know, you knew when you went to Newcastle, you were in for a tough time because like the whole town is behind their boys.
Yeah.
And like I know, again, it sounds weird coming from a Sydney-based supporter, but it's also one of my favorite things about going to up to Newey for games because it's a little bit like coming home.
Yeah.
Because I walk into that stadium and I'm like these are my people, and they're playing for their area, not for someone who lives 7 hours away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. But, you know, everything's fine. Just us to see you.
Yeah, everything's fine. We have another 5-year plan.
Yeah. Oh, man.
We've got
Don't.
to the end of the last. We've got to the end of this 5-year plan, and nothing's changed. So it's fine, guys, because we've got another 5-year plan. To become a top 4 team. Okay. Yeah, it was not great reading.
No, I feel like the only good thing that could come out of them having so much money allegedly is that they maybe start giving everyone $5 to as they come in the gates for having to deal with 2 hours of their life being lost watching Connor Watson play his 15th position this year.
And like tickets aren't cheap to go to a Knights game either.
No.
I've been a terrible fan because it's like a 5-6 hour round trip, not including the game, just for me to go to one.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get there and it's $50 to get in.
Mm-hmm.
And you watch that. I'm like, I've put more effort on the F3 getting up here than you put in on the field.
Yeah.
And it makes it really hard to be bothered.
Yeah, I get it. And that, like, people that don't know, that trip, it's the trip to get from Sydney, if you live in Sydney, to go up to Newcastle, I feel like it's the most horrible drive.
It can either go really well or really badly. Like
Yeah.
I went up to Newcastle yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and the M1 was closed about 2 exits before the link road into Newcastle. So I had to like go the back way into Newcastle, and it added an extra hour and a half to my trip.
Yeah.
Like if one thing, the number of times we've got caught in like bushfires and stuff on that trip.
Yeah.
And it's awful. It either goes really well and you get it like 2 hours on the dot, or you live there now.
Yeah. And the other thing is too, like, that's taking out of it times when there might be an accident and it's like, okay, I need to sit here for hours and hours and hours and there's no alternative.
Yeah.
Like, this is the road and it's the way through. And, you know, the one I hate is getting just onto the motorway when you're eventually onto the way up to Newcastle, because they're just the worst roads, you know.
They're just and like that's if like you're not familiar with the area, they've opened a new tunnel. And then there's about 3 like arterial roads all join the F3 at the set, like within 100 meters of each other. And it's chaos.
Yeah.
It's just getting onto the F3 can be a battle because you got to wind your way through Sydney and then get there, and then you get on the F3 and then you're at the mercy of the traffic gods. And if anything goes wrong, well, then you're stuck. Yeah.
You're completely stuck. It's like you might literally be able to sit there, open the car doors, feet out the car doors, just waiting.
We've had to do that before.
Yeah. It's like, can't they just have like the jaws of life chop it in for this poor soul that's down the road from us? Jeez. Now, I wrote an article earlier this week about alternative origin venues, and the second one on my list was the Newcastle Knights Stadium. My first one was I felt like if they could work it out, and this is if they have to move Origin from Melbourne, which it feels like they're going to. They might actually be announcing it as we're doing this podcast. But I said the first one that would be really cool would be to play at Eden Park in Auckland. The second one on my list was Newcastle Knights Stadium, the McDonald Jones Stadium. Do you think that it would be a good venue for Origin?
Yes, obviously. Like I'm going to say anything else.
I know, I was asking someone that twice. Do you think that they could get any sort of because I've never been to McDonald Jones Stadium.
McDonald Jones Stadium. We still have hills. We still have grass hills,
Yeah.
which I like. I love a grass hill. I mean, I grew up on. The North Hill was where we went. I went as a kid. That's where I grew up,
Mhm.
and I'm a staunch supporter of hills, and I reckon it'd be fantastic to have hills at an Origin game.
Yeah, to be a while. I think Old Lang Park still had some hills from
Back in
memory.
the 80s.
Yeah, yeah, like literally. So do you reckon that there would be some sort of capacity to get some extra temporary seating in there somewhere?
Uh, maybe on the corners.
Mm.
Probably not. I don't. No, I don't think so.
See, that's the thing. Like, the only way I feel like they could have maybe done it is if you put some seating behind the hills. But behind the hills, they've got a lot of stuff.
They've got they do have like demountables there that are now permanent.
Okay.
And it's like where the old commentary boxes and stuff used to be when they were changing this, rebuilding the stadium.
Yeah.
But at the back of those fall off pretty steeply.
Okay.
There's not a lot of room. You sort of fall off down into like the admission gates on one side and down into the car park on the other side.
There you go.
Yeah, so there's not much room to go back.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
because
I'll take Origin. I think Newcastle fans would be excited to have a good match.
Can you imagine that the whole place would go nuts?
It would be. It would. It'd be like, oh my God, good footy back in Newcastle. Bring it.
I feel like they're going to do the most boring option, which is just to play the game in like Brisbane or Sydney. I think that's what they're going to do. But it would be cool, as I wrote, if they took what is a really rotten situation for the rugby league, all of the gate takings they'd lose, and turn it into a super huge positive. And I understand them just taking the easy option, that.
I think Eden Park's a good shout.
Eden Park would be the same sort of thing. The only bad thing about Eden Park, I think, is you would have to coordinate it with the New Zealand government pretty closely, and I feel as though it might be a fly-in, fly-out situation just to keep the players in that bubble scenario. And the other thing is the kickoff time. I feel like they would have to kick off at, say, 8:30 Kiwi time. I think that would be 7:30 p.m. kickoff time over here, I think.
Well, I mean, they've managed to do it with Perth.
Yeah, true.
They managed to coordinate that with Perth. Eden Park, particularly because the Warriors have now committed again to staying in Australia.
Mm.
And I don't know if you were aware, last week Wellington Phoenix played their first home game back in New Zealand after
and they had a huge crowd.
They went mental.
Yeah.
And on my show I do on a Saturday morning, we've spoken about, I think the Warriors put saying that they wanted to, if they played their away games across New Zealand next season.
Mm-hmm.
Not at their home, and everyone went over to New Zealand, and like that sounds like a brilliant idea. And
yeah,
I can't remember. It wasn't V'landys, the other one. The
Andrew
NRL, possibly, like scoffed at the idea. And I think it was. It's just like such a slap in the face to Warriors fans and rugby league fans in New Zealand because they've not had their team now for 2 seasons, and something like an Origin. Just like a little, like, we haven't forgotten you. Yeah.
Look, we did an episode, it might have been midway through last year, where we said the New Zealand Warriors should not have to play outside of New Zealand for 2 years. And it was the exact same scenario where you have your home games in Auckland and all of the away games are just across New Zealand, even play games in the Pacific Islands if you want to. It should be totally up to them. But the NRL, they're only thinking about what happens in the next 5 minutes, it seems like.
Yeah. I think it just because it was I wouldn't say that they're everyone's second team, but particularly last season when everything happened so fast and they did all make the sacrifice to come over.
Mm-hmm.
And, so many people were buying up Warriors memberships to help the club out. And I think there is a little bit of sympathy for the team and for their fans,
Yeah.
understanding that, like, what they did sort of save the competition last season.
Yeah,
And
100%.
anything to, like, say thank you. I wouldn't, as much as I hate traveling Origin matches, they annoy me.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't oppose one in Eden Park. It's a good shout.
Yeah, it'd be cool. Now, let's change tack a little bit because there was some really interesting news I saw, I think it was a couple of days ago now, where the FFA had signed a deal with Channel 10 and a new streaming service, which I believe is called Paramount Plus, so they're moving the A League and the W League away from Fox Sports, which is a big step, I think, for everyone involved.
Like 15 years it's been at Fox Sports, so
yeah, and it feels like that when they went to having the A League, it was with the backing of Fox Sports saying, like, we see what you're doing, we're going to back it. And now they're sort of, letting go of the hand that was guiding them for a long time. But something needed to change, didn't it? Because the A League has gone from being, I understand in the first few, well, more than the first few seasons, probably the first 8 seasons, going pretty well, pretty healthy. But in the last number of years, it feels like it's dropping off pretty dramatically. And this year, it feels like something's really wrong. Something had to change, didn't it?
yeah. And because you're not like as across as A League as you're an NRL man, aren't you?
100%. Yeah, like I think the last time we were talking about, and I still call it soccer, and you're cool with that, which is great. We were talking about soccer for quite a long time, and I said to you, if I say something stupid, stop me and let me know. So I'm 100% a very, very far, far, far distant viewer of what's going on in the A League.
Because you ask like any A League fan about the state of the game, and which was highlighted when Western United a few weeks ago only had like 900 people at their game, and there was this big thing like the A League's dying. This has been one of the best A League seasons in recent years.
Really?
It has been, particularly the first half of the season was just fantastic.
Yeah. And
like, but unless you follow the game religiously, you wouldn't know that.
Wow.
And
yeah.
Because all the attention has like been on the negatives, which is also a running theme with I'll go soccer for your soccer in this country. It's always negative.
Mm-hmm.
And it like Fox Sports were like very important in like its launch and whatever, but it's probably good that there's going to be new life breathed into it, that because it has felt like they've not been putting as much energy into it as it deserves.
Okay.
And it has the potential to be a really great product if it's just treated kindly.
Now, do you think that bringing in Western United, I think it's weird whenever I see WU on the screen, I'm like, who the hell are they?
Western United is a fantastic team because it's 2 adjectives and tells you you have no idea where this team is from.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I know somebody's United and they're in the West somewhere, whereas they're in Melbourne. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, they're in West Melbourne. They joined the competition last season. They played in Geelong because their stadium still hasn't been built. They are supposed to be in Western Melbourne, but they're currently playing. I think they're at Amy Park now.
Yeah.
It's a very weird situation. Like, how do you create?
Is this stadium even begun being built?
No.
I
think like first plan, like there were plans released quite recently, but yeah, how do you build an identity for a club that doesn't have like A, a home stadium, B, no one knows where they're actually supposed to be?
Mm. And so, do you think that they were brought in like maybe 3 or 4 seasons too early?
I think they were. The location is wrong.
Okay.
There were the two. the two locations that probably would have done really well would have been Canberra, which already have Canberra United in the W League, because Canberra's been screaming out for a team in something else for years. They went for the AFL franchise, it went to GWS. Same with the netball, went to GWS, and both those teams have, like, I think the AFL have like Canberra written on the back of their jerseys, and they play a number of games in Canberra.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's hilarious. And I've been down there when they play, and it's like they make zero impact in Canberra when they're playing.
And Canberra has been screaming out for another team in another sport for years, and because they've already got a team in Canberra United, as I said, and the other one is Wollongong with the Wollongong Wolves. There's who play in NPL. They were another one who fans, I think, would have really got around. And the Wellington Phoenix were actually playing out of Wollongong while they were based in Australia. And when they played their home matches, they played in red, sort of in homage to the Wolves.
Oh, wow.
Which was a nice touch.
Yeah.
And I just think the location was really wrong, because we now have like 3 Melbourne teams and 3 Sydney teams, and it's just an oversaturation in a market that's already struggling.
Yeah, and like with the MacArthur FC, and when they were announced, I felt personally, and once again, very, very looking at it from afar, I felt like they were maybe 3 years too early, for the simple fact of, like, I'm still trying to get used to thinking that, and I don't live in the MacArthur, I live in Penrith, that I'm still trying to get used to the fact that the West Sydney Wanderers are the team that represents my area. And I feel like there would be a lot of people that were in the MacArthur region who, just as they're starting to get used to that fact, now they've got a brand new team, and like, my understanding is they actually have gone pretty well this year. Is that right?
Yeah, they're not doing too bad. Well, it's Wanderers used to play when they were good. They used to qualify for the Asian Champions League, and they used to play those matches out at Campbelltown.
Okay.
Not in Parramatta. And so they really sort of, like, they tried to bring in that area, because the other thing is, I forget that MacArthur is like quite a populated region now.
Yeah.
Because it's like there's a lot of new estates out there, and to me it's still like that Camden area is still country.
Yeah.
Like I forget that it's like the development there has been immense in the last sort of 10, 15 years. And so Western Sydney really tried to dig into that area, and they held off on the MacArthur. MacArthur only joined this season, and the reason they didn't join at the same time as Western United was Wanderers were moving back into Bank West. Because ask any Wanderers fans, and we'll tell you that the time we spent at Sydney Olympic Park were the lost years. It was awful. It was just an awful experience that we will never talk about again. And so we moved into Bank West, and it was like Wanderers had a season to rebuild the fortress that used to be Parramatta Stadium, and it just didn't go to plan.
No.
They didn't even make finals, haven't made finals this season. Well, mathematically it's still possible, but it's not going to happen. And there's Wanderers fans out in those MacArthur regions, and now like have jumped ship towards MacArthur, and they're actually pulling good crowds, like, for a new team. The cowbells need to go. They ring cowbells throughout the game, and like that needs to stop. But like, I think they're probably on track more so for success because they've got a stadium in Campbelltown as well.
Yeah.
Than like Western United.
And it's like, it's weird because I remember when they built Bankwest Stadium, and there was a lot of media that was coming out from the developers and the government and stuff, and it was like a lot of it was for it was the West Sydney Wanderers, it wasn't just the Parramatta Eels. And so when the stadium was opened, you kind of were thinking, and Parramatta fans, they sort of did their bit, they'd fill it up, but once again, their team was going pretty well at the time, and you kind of were waiting for the same sort of thing from the West Sydney Wanderers. and it just hasn't worked for them. And it's like, oh man, and that feels like the story of the A-League in a lot of ways, is that just when you think things are going to go right, they don't quite seem to work out.
Yeah, because the Wanderers, they came to the competition. So the way, if I'm explaining things to you already know, I do apologize. But so you have like the Premier's plate, and then you have the grand final winners. So because it's Australia, so like you have the team who comes first at the end of the regular season, like every other football competition in the world.
Yep.
But then because it's Australia, we then play a final series.
Yeah.
And Wanderers came first like 3 seasons in a row, their first 3 seasons. And then and made the grand. Oh no, they didn't come first. I think they came first in their first season, but then we made the grand final for the first 3 seasons, and we lost each grand final.
Yeah.
But we are still the only Australian team to win the Asian Championship League.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, they would pull 20 people, and the Wanderers' success and their crowds were a really big catalyst for Parramatta Stadium being rebuilt.
Yeah, yeah.
It was one of the like major driving factors, apart from the fact it was an awful stadium. It was the fact that this really successful team was now sharing it, that they had to, because you have to remember at the time as well, the Eels weren't great.
Yeah, they were pretty average. And the thing was too, like in the designs, they actually designed the ends of the stadium to have standing seating, and like it was very specific.
Which are brilliant.
Yeah, it wasn't like they said, oh, we're building a football stadium and the Eels are going to be there, but also the Wanderers are going to be there. It was like they were an integral part of it.
Yeah, it was really because this brilliant team were playing there, and then it's all fallen apart for the Wanderers in those years. And the others, when they were playing at Sydney Olympic, the whole rhetoric that time was, it will get better when we move into our new stadium. It'll get better when we move into the new stadium. Like, hold on for 2 or 3 years. When we get to Bankwest, it'll be fine. And there was sort of that belief that would happen last season, and then it didn't. And it's just opened the door for a team like Macarthur to come in and sort of steal those fans who would have had to have made, that hour trip to the stadium, being like, hey guys, we have a team that's at your doorstep.
It's now this TV deal. First of all, they're going to need some commentators. I don't know if you know that. Are you ready?
Yeah. Yeah.
We better see you. We better see you.
I mean, it's an absolute no-brainer. Simon Hill. That is the most. If they're going to get A-League fans on side, because that's the other thing. This is now another subscription that A-League fans have to sign up for. And I think it's $5.99 a month with Paramount Plus.
That's not bad.
Plus, but if you're paying that just for A-League, and then there is this free-to-air game, which is something that the Fox Sports contract doesn't have at the moment, this free-to-air game with 10, if you're going to get fans on side and sign up, you have to get Simon Hill on board. That is an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah. Simon Hill and Jessica Dunne.
The dream team.
Yeah, the 2 pillars of Australian football.
I like to think I am somewhat professional, but if I was in a booth with Simon Hill, I would be a mess. I've spent all of like 10 minutes with Simon, who is the loveliest human on the planet.
Oh, that's nice.
And he probably thinks I'm a moron.
Oh. Are you the Women's World Cup?
Yes, bring it.
Yeah.
My cousin is getting married at that time in England, and I'm a bridesmaid, and I sent her the dates and said, I'm not joking, but if you plan your wedding within these dates, I will not be there.
Yeah. Look, I'm looking forward to the Women's World Cup too, because I know somebody that is going to be commentating some of the games. I won't say a name on this podcast, but I'm hoping she can get me some free tickets or something. That'd be really nice if she's Just a hint.
That's not the poison touch. We'll see what we can do.
Yes. Oh man, I love this idea that you're like, yeah, and I'm gonna need a couple of extra tickets just for somebody I know. Um, yeah, it's
Name League Freak.
name at League Freak.
Yeah.
So how much of an impact do you think that that's going to have on the Australian game overall? Like, I know it's going to have a big effect on the women's game, but do you think that it's going to have a flow-on effect to the men's game as well?
God, I hope so. Australia really, sorry, they're now the FA, which is really confusing with the English FA. But
so ridiculous.
Football Australia really dropped the ball when Australia won the Asian, like the Asian Championship.
Yeah.
Soccer in 2015. We hosted, like we had the final. We hosted it. It was like the first trophy Australia had really won, and they just completely dropped the ball in using that momentum to build a brilliant product. Because if you look at that, the A-League has gone downhill since then.
Yeah.
There is, and you'd hope that they have learnt from those mistakes and will use the Women's World Cup as a catalyst for bringing in more people. And I think it's as like, because we had that horrendous failed bid for the Men's World Cup a few years ago.
Yeah.
I think it's good that we're going to have the women's first, because the Matildas are so loved. And there's a research company called True North who they do a quarterly survey of which teams have the most emotional connection with their fans. And the Matildas consistently come out on top, being like all the men's teams, like it's always the Matildas. And they just connect with their fans. And I think gender like obviously plays a big part in that. And they're successful as well.
Yeah.
Hell, and not only are we successful, but we now have players. This has been a really sort of watershed moment for Australian football, women's football, because this season we've had so many players playing in the biggest teams in the world in Europe.
Yeah.
It's like the first we've had players consistently in like the US, but now we have them, particularly in England. Obviously Sam Kerr just won the Golden Boot in England. She now holds the Golden Boot for Australia, the US, and England.
Whoa.
Like she's pretty all right, that Sam Kerr.
When's she going to get the overall one, the FIFA one?
The goal, Ballon d'Or.
Yeah.
There's a conspiracy against Sam Kerr, because was it 2 years ago she wasn't even named as in the shortlist for the best Asian player of the year.
No way.
Yeah, she was either getting in the top 3. It was super bizarre. There is a conspiracy against Sam Kerr, and I will die on this hill. And I just learn from the mistakes of 2015 and use it to really build the game and show that there's not that it is a loved sport. It's not a loved sport in the world.
Yeah.
But Australia, for some reason, is just so allergic to it.
Yeah, I think. Look, I like, because this is all of a sudden you just stepped into a giant
Yes.
We could do like 2 hours just on this. It's an interesting one, because I think it's a little bit like basketball in that you can turn on the TV and watch the best in the world. Yeah. And it's hard to get people to then watch the local competition, because you're fighting against that. Like, you see how many teams have if you said, what's your favorite basketball team? They'll say an NBA team. Same thing in soccer. It's like, what's your favorite soccer team? And they'll all say somebody usually in Europe. Yeah. And I feel like the two sports kind of have the same sort of problem. Whereas I think if you're a rugby league fan, the best rugby league competition's in Australia. And that's the problem. I think that's where Australia has, and it's also a thing of like, the Socceroos were starting to get to a point where they were able to, go toe to toe with those teams that were, say, and I'm being very generalized here, like 10 to 20,
Yeah.
they could have games there. And they maybe on their day could scare the teams in the top 10, maybe not the top 5. Whereas now, it feels like they've fallen right off of that.
Well, you look at that golden generation, the 2006 Socceroos,
Mm.
and you look at where those players were playing at the time.
Hmm.
They were all in like the top leagues around in Europe. Most of them were playing in Europe. I mean,
Yeah.
Fuel at Liverpool, Schwarzer at Middlesbrough, the Duker at Leeds, that kind of thing. And then you look at now where they're playing, and I think that the best we got is Matty Ryan was on the bench for Arsenal.
Yeah. Well, that
And
makes me
as a
question.
goalkeeper, which meant he never got a game.
Yeah.
So that discrepancy in like where you can't compete with the best if you're not playing against the best at a club level.
It's impossible. It's completely
Yeah.
impossible. And that makes me question, like, because when the A League was brought in, and once again, if anyone watches the A League and they're listening to me talk and they're like, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Yeah, you're right. When the A League was brought in, there was a feeling of like, we'll have the young players to a point and then they'll go to Europe. And I wonder if just that little slither where they are coming into the A League, that when they would normally go straight to Europe at that point, if that is just a development gap that it's just too big for them, where clubs in Europe are like, well, first of all, these players we wanted to get them about 4 or 5 years younger than this if we want them as a junior in Europe, and secondly, we're watching them in a senior competition now, and they're all right, but they're not better than our juniors that we've got. Is that a problem that we have?
I think so. And a lot of our players don't go to Europe anymore. They tend to go to Asia,
Okay.
um, or like Saudi Arabia or those type of. Turkey's a really big one, which I know is Europe
Hmm.
in terms of a football sense. They tend to go there now, not to like the Bundesliga or Premier League or even the Championship,
Yeah.
which I will argue to my dying day is one of the best competitions in the world.
Mhm.
Um, it's yeah, they don't, because there's so much more money than there was 20 years ago when the only place you could go was Europe. Now there's so much money in like China and Japan.
Mm.
They tend to go there as well.
Yeah, and that's like, I mean, you could be a millionaire player no one in Australia really knows about
Yeah.
because you're playing maybe in the Chinese league,
Well,
and it's great. It's great overall for the game, but it for the pathways for Australian players, it's not what was working to a point.
yeah, 100% agree. It's you look at the team list, and there's like quite a few A-League players in the team at the that's just been called up because we've got some World Cup qualifiers
Hmm.
coming up, and there's a lot of like A-League players in there, which I mean is great for the domestic league, but they've been so sheltered in this A-League
Hmm.
that then they go on to against the best in the world, and they just can't compete,
Yeah.
which we saw at the last World Cup.
Yeah, and I also feel like for general sports fans in Australia, every so often we like to slay a dragon. And with that golden age of the team, it was like this for years and years and years. And we slayed the dragon. We got to the World Cup. And then we got to the World Cup again. And it's like, yeah, but we got to the World Cup before. And so
Yeah,
there's not this dragon that's there to be slayed because it's still in our memories that we got to the World Cup. And I
yeah.
feel as though that's hurt soccer's um, ability to break into the mainstream thought process as well in Australia.
Like you think about that night against Uruguay in
Oh,
2005 when we qualified for the World Cup, and that is, it doesn't matter even if you're, like yourself who doesn't really follow football,
mm,
it's still a moment sort of everyone remembers.
mm-hmm.
Like the whole country just stopped for Aloisi's penalty.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I was at the last qualifications for the World Cup in Russia when we played Honduras, and it just, like, don't get me wrong, I was excited and I lost my mind, but there wasn't that sense of like unity across the country
Yeah.
that we, in a World Cup, it was like football fans were excited and we were, ready for it, but outside of that there wasn't the same excitement.
Yeah, and it's funny because when we didn't have to go through beating like I can't remember if it was the like fifth or sixth place South American team.
Mm.
Um, like we knew how terribly difficult that was, and Uruguay, funnily enough, become the bad guy for
Yeah.
Australia. Loved Uruguay, and you know, I mean, I even watched the game that they played in Uruguay, like. And as you say, I'm not a die-hard soccer fan by any stretch of the imagination, but it was like, this is our target as a sporting nation. We have to do this.
Yeah.
And when we eventually did it, and it was absolutely insane. And even when we were at that World Cup that we'd qualified for, it was absolutely incredible. And there were so many awesome stories that come out of that World Cup for us.
And there
And
was a lot of excitement even back in Australia because, you had all the viewing places that you could
mm,
go and watch it. They set up screens in the middle of cities, and I don't really remember that happening for Russia.
no, I don't think it did. Like I remember those viewings, and people were turning up in thousands to be there, and it was, and then the next time it come around, and it was like, it was weird. I found it very strange myself because I was like, we're back here again. Like, why
Mm.
isn't everyone as excited about it? It's very weird.
And also that, I mean, the World Cup in South Africa in 2010, we got beat by like Germany 4-0 in like our first game or something.
Mm.
And I think that sort of set the tone for the next 11 years where we don't get excited. There's that understanding that the players just aren't playing for the same sort of club, the same caliber of club that they were with that golden generation. And, yeah, we've qualified for the World Cup, but there's no real excitement because we don't expect to get out of the group stages. Whereas, God,
That's
we got within 10 minutes of getting past Italy, who went on to win it in 2006.
Yeah, and we were screwed. We were screwed by FIFA. That was our World Cup trophy, damn it. But you're right. Like we were like we felt like we'd got to a level there,
Yes,
and
and
yeah,
it was this excitement that we could build on it, and it was, it was going to be brilliant, and it just never panned out that way as it has with football in this country for the past 100 years.
yeah. And then we go into the next World Cup, and it's like, oh, it's over already for us, basically.
Yeah, basically, I think only thing people really remember from that World Cup was that screamer of a goal Cahill scored against the Netherlands,
Yes.
uh, in a match that didn't matter.
Yeah. Ah. Can you
That's
imagine if
right.
he had been in that, just if he had been at the level he was in that World Cup, but in the
Oh,
previous World Cup?
oh,
Oh
oh,
man.
don't go there. Don't go
Oh,
there. It's fine. We got the best World Cup song out of South Africa in Waka Waka by Shakira. It's fine. That's all we need.
I can't remember that. Hey, the only thing I
I
remember
will
from
for you.
South Africa was we were
Oh,
disappointing, and the drone of vuvuzelas.
yeah.
Oh my
Yeah, the
God.
world was introduced to vuvuzelas, and you just make that sound around any football fan, and they'll immediately curl up into a ball.
And it went on for like a few years afterwards around the
Yeah,
world.
I
Oh,
rem- I, I remember watching the Australia Germany match, and it was on at about like 5 o'clock in the morning or something, and I got up to watch it and genuinely thought there was something wrong with my TV. It's like, what is this sound?
I remember when like it was being explained
Mm,
after the game, and I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody on a sport. It might have been on Fox Sports, I guess, but they had one, and they were like, yeah, it's a soccer cultural thing in South Africa, and it's really cool and it adds atmosphere. And I'm thinking, no,
no.
it's stupid. They're dumb. What are
Yeah,
they doing?
yeah. It's funny how like World Cup introduces you to things, because the next World Cup in Brazil was the first time that the referees started using the foam to like mark out free kicks and stuff.
Yeah.
But no one explained that to the fans, so it just looked like the referee had lost the plot, like drawing on like the field.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, that was weird when you first saw that,
Yeah,
hey?
what are they doing?
See, I prefer, the intricacies of English soccer where, you just throw coins at players. That's more.
Going to some of the nicer things that I've seen thrown at players.
I know. I'm trying to calm it down. I don't want to get in trouble. You know what it's like. Oh, man. Well, I shouldn't keep you all afternoon because I've had you on for a long time now, and I know you've got things to do, but it's always awesome to talk to you. It's always awesome to get your opinions on the Knights, and it's always really cool to talk about soccer with you as well because I always learn something, and you always set me straight on basically everything I say.
You're welcome.
Where can we hear you? Because I know that you do some shows with Clutch Radio, I believe it's called.
Yes, I am Saturday mornings. We do the Saturday Surf
Hmm.
at 10 a.m.
Hmm.
So where we talk pretty much about every sport. We and also about our lives.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's always a lot of fun. 2 hours, 10 to 12 usually on Clutch Radio,
Yeah.
which is online streaming. So that's a lot of fun. And hopefully we'll be hitting Super Netball as well. I'll be on call for those games very
Oh,
soon.
nice. Nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Where did they play the Super Netball games at in Sydney?
Hopefully I'll be doing the Swifts game, and we will be at Ken Rosewall Arena at Sydney Olympic Park. They've put a fantastic roof on that and converted it into netball courts as well.
Is that
So
the
it's a really
is that their tennis courts?
Yes, tennis courts are now being also used for the netball.
Wow, that's pretty cool. That is what
Yeah,
that must be a really cool arena for netball. Actually, like perfect for it.
it is because they played it they're at Kudos, which like is it's good, but if they don't get the crowds, they do shut the top tier off, and it can get a little bit echoey in there.
Yeah.
And the now defunct entertainment center they're at, which was like the same story, but Ken Rosewall is really intimate, and
Mm.
it's a fantastic arena. It's a lot of fun. You feel like you're on top of the action.
How do you go switching between sports when you're commentating?
I'm all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be hard,
Yeah.
particularly like with the netball. For some reason, when I go from like netball to, not that I call rugby league, but like even just watching rugby league,
Yeah.
when they start running with the ball, I'm like, no, that's a step. For like the first couple of minutes, like, oh wait, no, different sport, never mind. No, it's good. It keeps me on my toes, that's for damn sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine. I can imagine.
Keeps me, yeah. It means that I have an excuse to watch a lot more sport though. Like, well, it's my job.
Yeah. It's not a bad job, eh?
Yeah, pretty good. We'll take it.
Where else can we find you? Like on Twitter?
My Twitter is Jessica Teneal, Teneal.
Yep.
I'm on there usually crying about the Knights.
Yeah.
That's
Very. If anybody doesn't know, lots of anger. Very, very angry.
a lot of anger, a lot of sarcasm, a lot of resignation to my fate.
Yeah, there really is. There's so much resignation.
It's like, yeah. Every time I think I've found true happiness, I remember who I support, and that's not just the Knights, but also the Wanderers and Middlesbrough, God bless them.
Yeah.
So yeah, just that. Oh no, I'll never experience true happy because there'll always be someone there to disappoint me.
There's
Yeah.
sometimes I'll be watching a Knights game and I'll think, man, Jessica's must not be watching this. No, she must be. And then there'll just be a random post that you put up like 60 minutes in and it's just pure resignation. And it's like, oh no, she's just like in a fetal position watching this game.
Yeah.
That's all it's been.
Yeah. I go through phases where I'll like have 1,000 tweets in like 10 minutes. And then other times it will just be too awful and I can't formulate words. Or what I want to say, I cannot. So just don't go there.
Yeah, yeah. Trust me,
Yeah,
it's the
just a
right thing
lot.
to do.
Yeah, it's usually just a lot of sarcasm. Nothing I say is ever too serious.
Nah.
It always makes me laugh when someone replies with a really like serious like reply, and I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, you must be new here.
Yeah, yeah.
Everything I say is in sarcasm, is sarcastic.
It is funny when you'll post something that's sarcastic and then someone like tries to break down like the left edge attack or something and you're like, dude, I'm just here for the lols, you know?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's like really like go through like all of my tweets, and you will find that I have never like written anything serious on this page ever.
yeah, yeah. It is weird when that happens. Well, we'll
Like,
get you
and
back. We'll get you back on soon enough. What I'd say that we'd get you back on when the Knights win the next game, but geez. Whew.
wow, if you don't want to have me back, just say so.
See, this is why we have Nadine on a lot because I get her on when the Panthers win, and wow, she's just always on every week. So you know what that's like. Well, not really, but anyway.
I changed my mind. I'm never coming back.
Oh shit. So look, thank you for coming on. It is always awesome to have you on. We always have a really good chin wag. And everyone, give Jessica a follow. Go and listen to her on Clutch Radio. It's a great station, great people involved in it. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I can't wait until the next time. The therapy session.